Right now, you may be lying in the dark, feeling the familiar, high-pitched hum of a mind that simply refuses to stop scanning the horizon for trouble. It is that restless sensation of needing to interpret every passing thought, as if by figuring out the meaning of a stray regret or a vague future worry, you could finally lock the door against the storm. The air in your room is still, perhaps carrying the faint, cool scent of an approaching rain, or maybe just the dry, static energy of a long day spent holding your breath. Your body is trying to settle, wanting to sink into the weight of the mattress, but your thoughts are like a weather vane caught in a gale. They are spinning wildly, pointing first one way and then another, desperately trying to catch the direction of the next gust before it even arrives. You feel as though if you could just read the wind correctly, if you could just master the art of predicting where the pressure is going to shift, you would finally be safe from the uncertainty of your own life. Maybe you have felt this too, that exhaustion of being the one who must always know why a mistake happened, or what a silent glance meant, or why a sudden heavy feeling arrived in your chest. It is a lonely burden to carry, this idea that your peace depends on your ability to decode the world. But I want to offer you a different perspective, one that is as old as the mountains that host the turning vane. The peace you are seeking is not found in the mastery of the wind. It is found in the simple, profound realization that you are not the one who needs to predict the storm. You are not the vane that is forced to spin in circles. You are the mountain itself, vast, unmoving, and perfectly capable of letting the wind pass through, regardless of which way it blows. There is a quiet strength in realizing that the mind does not become calm because you have successfully interpreted every event. It becomes calm when you stop treating every internal gust as a mandate that must be solved. You are not failing because your mind is spinning, and you are not broken because you still feel the impulse to control the weather. You are simply exhausted from doing work that was never truly yours to do. Tonight, we will not ask you to stop the wind. That would be an impossible task. Instead, we will learn how to let the vane turn without being identified with its movement. We will learn how to rest in the space that remains still, even when the gales of your own life are blowing at their hardest. You do not need to force anything tonight. You do not need to analyze your feelings, or fix the loose ends of your day, or even prepare for tomorrow. Your only responsibility right now is to let the weight of your own interpretation fall away. There's no urgency here. The monastery of your own awareness is already open, and you are welcome to simply sit within its walls, watching the light change, without needing to know why it shifts. If it feels right, take a slow, deep breath, and let it out with a long, soft sigh. Let your eyes soften, letting the muscles around your eyelids relax, as if you are gently closing a shutter on the outside world. There is nothing to look for tonight. There is nothing to deduce from the shadows in the corner of your room. Your jaw, often tight with the unspoken need to justify yourself, can finally slacken. Feel the space between your teeth, the way your tongue rests against the floor of your mouth, and allow your shoulders to drop away from your ears. You are not a structure that must be propped up by the force of your own will. You are a living, breathing expression of the night itself. Maybe you have tried to be the architect of your own serenity for so long that the idea of simply being feels foreign. You are so accustomed to the friction of mental forecasting that the absence of it might feel like a strange, sudden silence. That is okay. You do not need to rush into this quiet. Let it be as it is. Think of your thoughts not as commands that must be followed to their conclusion, but as invisible drafts of air that visit you and then depart. They are not the truth of your life. They are just the weather, and just as the mountain does not change its nature when the wind shifts from north to south, your fundamental worth, your inner dignity, and your capacity for peace do not change because a worry passed through your mind. You are here, you are breathing. The room is quiet enough to hold you. This is the only reality that matters in this moment. The rest of the narratives, the rehearsals of past mistakes, and the rehearsals of future anxieties are just scripts that are no longer being performed. You are not the narrator tonight. You are the audience, watching the stage from the comfort of a dark velvet seat, and you are perfectly free to simply look away from the screen. Perhaps you are worried that if you stop interpreting, if you stop the constant vigil of your thoughts, you will lose your way. You might fear that without the constant internal commentary, you will be unprepared for what comes next. But consider this, is the vein truly prepared for the storm because it spins? Does it gain wisdom by frantically guessing the direction of the gale? No, it only experiences more wear, it only feels more strain. The wisdom is not in the spinning, the wisdom is in the pivot. It is in the iron pin that holds the vein to the mountain, the part that stays perfectly centered, perfectly still, no matter how hard the pressure pushes. We are going to find that pivot point together. We are going to find the place within you that has never once spun, never once worried, and never once tried to explain itself to the wind. This is a journey into the architecture of your own relief. It is not about silencing the mind, but about changing your relationship with its noise. Imagine that every thought, every worry, and every urge to interpret is just a light, invisible gust of mountain air. It has no substance, it has no permanent residence. It touches you, it moves you, and then it continues on its journey, leaving you exactly as you were before it arrived. You are the cliffside, you are the foundation, you are the earth that welcomes the wind, invites it to play, and never asks it to stay. Never asks it to explain its purpose, and never asks it to justify its coldness or its heat. Take another slow breath, focusing on the feeling of the air as it moves into your chest. Do not try to breathe deeply. Do not try to breathe perfectly. Just let the breath arrive as it wishes, in whatever rhythm the mountain provides. If your thoughts wander, if they catch on a particular memory or a specific fear, just notice it. Do not judge it. Do not try to push it away. Simply see it for what it is, a small, brief movement of air, and allow yourself to return to the feeling of the bed beneath you, the quiet space of your room, and the promise that tonight you are allowed to be empty of conclusions. You are safe enough to soften. The walls of this room are solid. The night is deep and protective, and you are not required to hold anything up. The world will continue to turn while you sleep. The wind will continue to blow. The sun will rise in the morning regardless of whether you have successfully resolved the riddle of your own life. Tonight, there is a profound mercy in this. There is a deep, gentle permission to be finished with the labor of being a perfectionist. You are simply a person here, now, in the quiet, and that is more than enough. In a moment, we will explore the story of the old bell ringer who lived on the edge of the high temple cliff, and the strange iron compass he kept that never moved, even as the seasons changed around him. But for now, just rest. Feel the weight of your limbs, the heaviness of your hands as they rest beside you, and let the rhythm of your own heart be the only clock you follow. You are not missing anything. You are not falling behind. You are exactly where you need to be, at the edge of your own vast internal mountain, ready to let the wind carry whatever needs to be carried, and to keep the rest for yourself in the silence. Is there a part of you that is relieved to hear this? Is there a part of you that has been waiting, perhaps for years, to simply put down the heavy iron rod of explanation and lean back into the wind? You do not have to answer that. You only have to feel the possibility of it. You only have to notice the soft, quiet space that opens up when you stop trying to know, stop trying to guess, and stop trying to be the master of the unseen. The night is yours. The peace is yours. The pivot, the still center of your own soul, is already waiting. In a high, windswept temple perched on a cliff that seemed to pierce the clouds, there lived an elderly monk named Jiro. He was the keeper of the monastery's weather vane. It was an ancient, intricate device of hammered brass, shaped like a soaring crane. Its wings spread wide to catch the invisible currents of the mountain air. Jiro had spent 40 years tending to this instrument. Every morning, he would climb the winding stone steps, his breath hitching in the cold, thin air, to reach the platform where the crane sat on its rusted iron pin. His task was simple, yet he made it feel monumental. He would carefully wipe the brass feathers with a cloth of silk, watching to see how the crane turned. If the vane pointed north, he would fret about the crops in the valley. If it swung toward the east, he would worry about the encroaching mist that often delayed the supplies. He was convinced that if he could watch the crane long enough and observe its subtle, nervous shudders, he could understand the coming weather and somehow prepare the monastery for the hardship of the gale. One autumn, a young traveler arrived at the temple gates. His name was Kenji, and he was a man who looked as though he had been running from a storm for his entire life. Kenji was a maker of maps, a man obsessed with lines, borders, and the safety of a fixed, charted world. But his maps never felt complete. Every time he drew a path, he worried about the rock slide he had not accounted for, or the sudden rain that might wash the trail away. He was paralyzed by the idea that if he missed one detail, one tiny, shifting variable, his entire life would be lost in the wilderness. When he found the temple, he begged Jiro to teach him how to read the world, hoping that the monk, with his constant attention to the wind, held the secret to certainty. Jiro agreed to let Kenji help him on the platform. The first morning, the air was sharp and biting. Kenji stood beside Jiro, his eyes fixed on the brass crane. A sudden gust of wind hit the temple, and the vane pivoted violently. Kenji gasped, his hand flying to his chest. He immediately began to calculate. He looked at the direction of the crane, then at the clouds gathering in the west, then at the way the trees in the valley were bending. His mind was a frantic machine, clicking and whirring, trying to find a pattern, trying to determine if this wind was a sign of a gentle breeze or a destructive tempest. He turned to Jiro with a desperate expression, asking if the crane was warning them of a disaster. Jiro did not look at the sky. He did not look at the trees. He simply continued to polish the brass feathers, his movements slow and rhythmic, the soft sound of cloth against metal the only response to Kenji's alarm. Days passed, and the pattern repeated. The wind would change, the crane would swing, and Kenji would spiral into a new crisis of interpretation. He wanted to know why the wind blew, what it meant for his safety, and how he could use that knowledge to keep the world from changing. He kept a small, heavy iron compass in his pocket. It was a beautiful object, perfectly weighted, but its needle was stuck, fused in place by years of corrosion. Kenji held it constantly, rubbing the smooth, cold surface of the casing with his thumb. He clung to the compass as if it were an anchor. It did not matter that the needle was broken and useless. Its very solidity, its refusal to move, gave him a sense of temporary comfort. It represented the version of his life he wanted. Static, predictable, and entirely within his control. One evening, after a particularly fierce afternoon of swirling gales, Kenji sat on the edge of the platform, the iron compass clutched tightly in his fist. His knuckles were white. He looked exhausted, the skin around his eyes pulled tight from days of incessant mental scanning. The sky was turning a bruised, deep purple, and the wind was howling through the gaps in the temple walls. Jiro sat beside him, watching the horizon. He did not speak about the wind. He did not mention the crane. Instead, he reached out and gently tapped the iron compass in Kenji's hand. He asked a simple question that seemed to hang in the air, detached from the urgency of the moment. He asked if the compass felt lighter when the wind blew. Kenji looked down at the object in his hand, then back at the monk he did not understand. He explained that the compass was just as heavy as it had always been, that it was the only thing he had that didn't change, that didn't react to the shifting air. Jiro smiled, a small, subtle expression that didn't reach his eyes but seemed to touch something deeper. He asked Kenji to place the compass on the stone floor, away from his grip. Kenji hesitated, afraid that if he let go, he would lose his connection to the only stable thing he owned. But he did it. He set the compass down. It sat there, a dark, inert weight against the gray stone. Jiro then stood up and walked over to the rusted iron pin that held the crane. Vain he placed his finger on the pin, right at the center of the turning mechanism. He looked at Kenji and pointed to the pin, then to the crane's wings, and finally to the sky. He did not give a lecture on meteorology. He did not explain the physics of the wind. He only pointed to the stillness at the heart of the movement. He invited Kenji to watch the crane once more, not to look at where it pointed, but to notice what allowed it to point. Kenji looked. For the first time, he stopped trying to decipher the crane's position. He stopped asking what the direction meant for his future. He watched the wings spin. He heard the creak of the metal, and he saw the way the wind pushed the crane into motion. But his attention shifted, as if a veil had been pulled aside. He saw the iron pin. He saw that the pin did not spin. He saw that the pin did not need to guess the direction of the wind to fulfill its purpose. It was perfectly content to stay exactly where it was, holding the crane steady, letting the wind do its work, and never once feeling the need to explain or interpret the gust. A strange, quiet sensation began to grow in Kenji's chest. It was the first time in his life that he felt the frantic speed of his own mind begin to slacken. He looked at the brass crane, and he looked at the iron compass lying on the stone floor. He realized that the compass was just another way of trying to pin the world in place. A desperate, childish attempt to freeze reality into something that wouldn't hurt him. But the crane was already moving, the wind was already blowing, and the pin was at peace because it had nothing to prove. He turned to look at Jiro, expecting a lesson, expecting a set of rules for how to live, or perhaps a prophecy of the next storm. But Jiro had already turned away, beginning to sweep the dust from the platform with his bamboo broom. The sound of the straw bristles against the stone was the only answer. Kenji realized then that the lesson was not in the vein, and it was not in the compass. It was in the sudden, terrifying, and beautiful discovery that he had been trying to control the wind by gripping a broken needle. As the night settled over the temple, Kenji left the compass where it lay. He did not need to take it with him. He sat in the dark, feeling the wind move across his face, not as a threat to be analyzed, but as a current that had nothing to do with him. He noticed a thought arrive, a worry about the descent tomorrow, and for the first time, he did not reach out to catch it. He did not try to turn it into a map. He simply let it move through him, like the wind through the wings of the crane, and watched as it continued on its way, leaving the mountain path entirely unchanged. He was not yet calm, and the fear was not yet gone. But the grip of the iron compass was starting to loosen, and in that loosening, he found a breath of air that did not feel like it had been stolen from the future. This story is not asking you to stop caring about the direction of your life. It is not suggesting that you become indifferent to the wind that blows through your days, or that you pretend the gale does not carry a certain chill. Instead, it is pointing toward a much quieter realization. Think of the brass crane. It was designed to turn. It was built to move in harmony with the air. The suffering that Kenji experienced was not caused by the wind itself. The wind is simply a force of nature, moving from one place to another, indifferent to whether it causes a breeze or a storm. The suffering Kenji lived with was born in the moment he decided that the movement of the vein was a message he had to decode, a secret he had to unlock, or a threat he had to neutralize before he could feel safe. You know this experience well. It is that tightening in the center of your chest when something unexpected happens. It is the way your mind immediately begins to hunt for a meaning, a pattern, or a hidden cause. You feel that if you can just understand why the wind turned north, or why the conversation ended abruptly, or why you felt that sudden, sharp pang of insecurity, you will finally regain your footing. But the reality is that the mind often creates a second wound to sit on top of the first. The first wound is the event itself. It is the sudden change in the weather, the disappointment of a plan gone awry, or the simple human experience of being hurt. That is life. It is inevitable. It is the wind blowing. But the second wound, the one that keeps you awake at night and makes your jaw clench during the day, is the one you add yourself. It is the way your mind grips the event, tries to force it into a narrative, and demands that it be different than it truly is. When you look at the iron compass in the story, you can see how clearly it represents this second wound. It was a tool that provided a false sense of certainty. It was a heavy, cold object that Kenji clung to because he was terrified of the fluid, ever-changing nature of the mountainside. You might have your own version of that compass. It might be the habit of replaying a memory over and over, hoping that this time you can change the outcome or find a way to justify your actions. It might be the way you obsessively plan for the next 5 years, trying to construct a map that leaves no room for surprise. You cling to these things because they feel like they provide a boundary, a definition of who you are, and a way to hold back the unpredictable flow of your own existence. But consider the pin that held the crane in place. It did not need to be a map maker. It did not need to be a prophet. It did not need to be anything other than what it was. A solid, unmoving center that allowed the crane to do exactly what it was meant to do. In the language of the heart, this is what we mean when we talk about awareness. Awareness is not a way of becoming cold or detached. It is the capacity to hold the movement of your life without needing to categorize it, judge it, or force it to be something else. When you are caught in the swirl of an anxious thought, you are like Kenji. trying to grab the crane by the wings and hold it still. You are trying to freeze the wind because you are afraid of what it might bring. But the vane is meant to turn. Your thoughts are meant to arise and pass. Your emotions are meant to flow like the currents in the valley. This teaching is about learning how to move with the wind instead of against it. It is about recognizing that your peace is not located in the crane's position. It is located in your ability to return your attention to the pin, to that still, centered place within you that is never threatened by the change in the atmosphere. When you feel that urge to interpret, when you feel the mind demanding that you find a meaning for your sadness or a justification for your worry, stop for a moment. Feel the weight of that urge in your body. Notice how it feels like a heavy object, like a cold, iron compass resting in your palm then. Ask yourself if you can let it sit on the stone for a moment. You do not have to throw it away. You do not have to discard it forever. Just put it down. Let it rest there while you attend to the actual life happening in front of you. You will find that when you stop trying to fix the wind does not necessarily stop. The world will still be complicated. Your life will still have its gusts and its periods of calm. But the internal experience changes entirely. You stop fighting the weather. You stop treating your own thoughts as if they are a disaster waiting to happen. You start to see that the panic was only a story you were telling yourself about the wind. The reality is far simpler, far softer, and far more spacious. You are the mountain. You are the temple. You are the space that remains when the wind has come and gone. There is a profound freedom in realizing that you do not need to be the authority on your own turbulence. You do not need to be the chief engineer of your emotions. You can be the witness. When a difficult feeling arises, let it arise. Do not ask it to prove itself to you. Do not ask it to provide a reason for its existence. Let it spin the vane if it wants to. Let it turn you toward the north or the east, but keep your attention on the pin, on the breath, on the feeling of your own body sitting in the quiet. This is the difference between being a victim of your own mind and being the master of your own presence. You might wonder if you are capable of this, especially when the gale is blowing hard. You might worry that if you stop trying to explain your pain, you will be overwhelmed by it. But this is the paradox of the mountain. By trying to hold the crane still, you only increase the friction in the wear. You only tire yourself out. By letting the crane turn, you actually allow the energy of the wind to pass through the structure safely. It is the same with your heart. When you stop resisting the movement of your life, the intensity of the struggle begins to fade. The pressure that felt so crushing starts to resemble something much smaller, much more like the natural, rhythmic motion of a season shifting. Trust that you have this capacity to pivot, even if it feels rusty or stiff right now. It has been there all along, beneath the layers of effort and the habit of constant analysis. Every time you notice yourself gripped in the effort of interpreting, you are already halfway to the pin. You have already recognized the movement. You have already seen the crane spinning. That spark of recognition is your practice. It is the moment you choose not to add the second wound. It is the moment you decide to set the compass down and just breathe. As you sit here in the dark, you are not being asked to change your character or become a different person. You are being asked to become a little more like the mountain, steady, welcoming, and entirely comfortable with the fact that the weather is beyond your control. The wind will blow tomorrow. The vane will turn. The world will continue to present you with moments that you did not ask for and cannot fully understand. But you, dear friend, will be different. You will know that you are not the one who needs to predict the storm. You will know that you are the space that holds it. And in that knowing, you will find a quietness that is strong enough to carry you through anything. Notice your hands now. Are they resting? Are they perhaps still holding onto an invisible compass? Gently open your fingers. Release the tension in your palms. Let your hands lie flat and soft, like they have nothing left to prove and no maps left to draw. You are not losing your way. You are finally finding the path that was meant for you all along. The wind is just air, your thoughts are just ripples, and you are the deep, still water, reflecting the sky, letting the patterns appear and vanish, without ever needing to possess them, without ever needing to solve them, and without ever needing to be anything other than the stillness that allows the whole world to be. Now, We move from the story into the quiet landscape of your own experience. You do not need to sit in any particular posture, and you do not need to focus on a single point with force. Let your body find its own way into ease, perhaps shifting slightly until your limbs feel heavy and the weight of your frame is fully surrendered to the bed. If it feels right, you might simply close your eyes, letting the darkness of the room mingle with the darkness beneath your lids. There is nothing to look for tonight. There is no vein to polish, and there is no wind to predict. Begin by noticing your breath, not as a function that needs to be mastered, but as a gentle rhythmic tide. Let it move in and out of your chest without effort. You might observe how the air touches the back of your throat, or how your ribcage expands and retracts with the simplicity of a forest breathing in the night. If you feel the impulse to control the depth of your breath, just acknowledge it. That is simply the habit of the mapmaker. Trying to chart the course of the air, just let it be. Let the breath arrive and depart, a silent guest that does not require your permission or your guidance. Now, bring your attention to the internal space of your mind. You have been carrying the weight of so many interpretations today. You have been turning like that brass crane on the temple cliff, feeling every shift in the atmosphere as if it were a demand for your vigilance. Without trying to change anything, simply notice the current mood of your inner weather. Perhaps there is a persistent worry about tomorrow or a lingering echo of a conversation that felt incomplete. Whatever it is, identify the pattern. Is it a frantic scanning for danger? Is it a tight grip on a memory? Is it a heavy iron-like need to be certain about how things will unfold? You do not need to push these feelings away. To fight them would be to add another layer of friction, another turn of the rusted pin. Instead, imagine that you are holding that brass crane in your mind, and you can see it pivoting, pushed by the gusts of your own thoughts. See the movement clearly. Observe the way your attention is drawn to where the vein points, and how quickly your heart begins to race when the vein points towards something uncertain. This is the moment of recognition. This is the pivot point. If it feels right, imagine that you have a soft silk cloth in your hands. This is not a cloth meant to scrub or to fix. It is a cloth meant to acknowledge. With each breath, imagine you are gently dusting the surface of that turning crane. You are not trying to stop it from spinning. You are simply noticing that it is the wind that moves it, not your own will. As you breathe out, imagine you are releasing the need to be the one who interprets the gale. Feel the way your shoulders might drop a little further into the mattress. Feel the way your jaw, so often set against the unpredictability of the world, begins to unclench. You might find a thought arises that feels particularly heavy, like the iron compass Kenji carried. It might be a persistent fear or a sharp, self-critical judgment. Instead of clutching it, hold it in the palm of your awareness. Look at it not as a truth that defines your reality, but as an object you have been carrying. Notice its weight, notice the coldness of it, and then, in your own time, imagine yourself placing it down on the solid, unmoving stone floor of the monastery platform. You are not throwing it away, you are simply setting it down. Let it rest there, in the quiet, while you remain here, centered and still. Notice what happens when the object is no longer in your grip. Does the wind stop blowing? Of course not. The thoughts may continue to drift through the room of your mind, and the emotions may continue to ebb and flow, but look closely at the center of your own being. Look at the iron pin of your awareness. It is not spinning. It is not moved at all. It is the steady, unmoving foundation that allows the vein of your personality to react, to feel, and to respond, without ever losing its connection to the mountain. If you find your mind wandering back to the compass, if you find your hand reaching out to pick it up again, that is perfectly fine. There is no judgment in this space. Just notice the reaching. That is the habit, the mapmaker looking for work. Gently acknowledge it, and then set the compass down again. You can do this as many times as you need to, until the simple act of letting go becomes as natural as the breath itself. There is no race to be won tonight. There is no final state of perfection to be achieved. You are simply practicing the art of being the mountain, while the wind plays with the vein. Let your hands feel particularly soft now. You might let them rest on your stomach, or let them lie open by your sides, palms facing up to the ceiling. As you breathe, feel the spaciousness of your chest. Feel the distance between your thoughts and your center. You are becoming larger than the storm. You are becoming the vastness that the wind moves through. The anxiety, the overthinking, and the need to interpret the world. These are just gusts of air. They are temporary, and they are passing. They are not the architecture of your soul. If you notice a sudden contraction in your body, a sign that the old need for control is returning, do not be alarmed. Just invite a little more space into that area. Use your breath to carry warmth to the tight spots. Imagine your breath is the mountain air, cool and clear, washing away the grit of the day. You are safe enough to be quiet. You are safe enough to be uncertain. The monastery is secure. The cliffs are solid, and the stars are watching over the peaks. You do not need to know where the wind is coming from. You do not need to decide where it is going. You only need to remain right here, at the center, anchored in the stillness that no gale can ever touch. You might feel a sense of relief, or perhaps a strange, empty quiet that feels unfamiliar. Both are welcome. Both are just more weather. Let them be. Do not try to analyze why you feel this way. Do not try to decide if this is the right kind of peace. Just be. The iron pin of your presence is holding steady, and beneath the turning of your thoughts, there is an ocean of silence that has been waiting for your return. Rest in that silence. Rest in the knowledge that the wind will handle itself. You are done with the work of prediction, and you are finally ready to inhabit the peace of simply being the one who watches, the one who breathes, and the one who is held by the mountain itself. High in a different corner of the same mountain range, where the trees grew sparse and the air tasted of frozen stone, there lived a silent nomad named Alara. She was known among the mountain folk for her skill in weaving ribbons from wild silk, a craft she performed with a strange, intense devotion. Alara did not weave for beauty or for trade. She wove because she believed that if she could create a perfect, unbroken ribbon, she could tie the shifting, unpredictable energy of the mountain to her own will. If the wind blew from the north, she would weave a blue thread to calm it. If the clouds gathered in the west, she would weave a silver thread to scatter them. She was a woman who spent her days attempting to rewrite the weather through the rhythmic motion of her loom, convinced that her suffering was simply a failure to find the right combination of colors. One afternoon, a powerful gale swept through the meadow where Alara had set up her loom. It was not a common wind. It was a violent, unseasonable pressure that tore at the pines and sent loose slates skittering across the grass. Alara fought to keep her loom steady. She frantically grabbed at her silk threads, trying to weave a protective pattern to stop the gale before it destroyed her work. But the wind was too strong. A sudden, sharp gust snapped the main tension beam of her loom, sending the shuttle flying into the tall, swaying grass. Alara stared at the broken wood, her heart pounding with a familiar cold terror. She had spent months on this pattern. She had sacrificed sleep, food, and the comfort of her own home to get it right. Now, in the space of a single breath, the structure was gone. She did not cry out. She simply knelt in the dirt, her hands trembling as she reached for the broken pieces of the loom. She tried to jam the wood back together, her fingers bleeding against the splinters. She needed to fix it. She needed to return to the pattern, because if the pattern stopped, she would have to face the wind without a shield. She would have to face the fact that she was just a small person in a vast, uncaring landscape, and that terrified her more than the storm itself. A mountain nomad, an old man who traveled the high paths with nothing but a staff and a thin wool cloak, walked into the meadow. He watched Alara for a long time. He saw the way she clawed at the broken loom, her face twisted in a mask of desperate, painful effort. He did not rush to help her. He simply stood there, his back straight, his eyes tracking the way the gale bent the grass. Finally, he walked over and sat down on a flat rock just a few paces from where she knelt. He took a long, thin silk ribbon from his own cloak, a simple, plain, off-white strip, and he tied it to the branch of a nearby cedar tree. The ribbon was not anchored to a loom. It was not part of a complex pattern. It was just a thin, frayed piece of fabric. The nomad watched the ribbon. As the gale roared through the meadow, the ribbon began to dance. It whipped and curled, sometimes wrapping itself around the branch, sometimes flying out horizontally like a flag of surrender. It did not try to stop the wind. It did not try to weave a narrative against the gale. It simply moved with it. The nomad looked at Alara. whose hands were still locked around the splintered wood of her loom, and he gestured toward the ribbon. He asked her if she thought the ribbon was suffering. Alara looked at the ribbon, then at the broken loom, and finally at the old man. Her breath was coming in ragged, shallow gasps. She wanted to tell him that the ribbon was not suffering because it had nothing to lose. It wasn't a masterpiece. It wasn't a life's work, but when she opened her mouth, the words caught in her throat. She realized that she had been trying to weave a silk shield for her own fragility, thinking that if she made the pattern perfect enough, she would be immune to the mountain's shifts. The nomad didn't offer to mend her loom. He didn't tell her that her work was wasted. He reached into his cloak and pulled out a small curved needle of bone. He held it out to her, handle first. It was not a tool for weaving threads. It was a tool for sewing leather, a simple, blunt thing. He asked her to stand up and walk to the cedar tree and to take the ribbon down. Alara hesitated, but she stood. Her legs felt weak. She walked to the tree, the wind buffeting her body, and reached for the silk ribbon. As she pulled it from the branch, she felt the raw, kinetic energy of the gale against her skin. It wasn't cold. Not in the way she had feared. It was just air. It was just force. She held the ribbon in her hand, and for the first time, she felt the texture of the silk without thinking about the pattern. She felt the softness of it, the way it had been worn smooth by the mountain air. The nomad didn't ask her to go back to the loom. He asked her to walk with him to the edge of the cliff, where the meadow dropped away into the valley. He stood at the edge, the wind tearing at his gray hair, and he simply looked out into the vast open space. He told her that for years, he had tried to carry the mountain on his back, thinking that if he understood every peak and every gorge, he would never be lost. He said that he had spent his youth mapping the paths, measuring the distances, and dreading the nightfall. But he had discovered that the mountain did not want to be mapped. It only wanted to be walked. Alara looked at the ribbon in her hand. She thought about the loom, the hours of obsession, and the crushing weight of the need to be the architect of her own safety. Slowly, with a movement that felt both heavy and weightless, she stepped toward the edge of the cliff. She didn't throw the ribbon, and she didn't try to hide it. She just opened her hand. The wind caught the silk, and in a heartbeat the ribbon was gone, spiraling away into the deep blue of the valley, dancing exactly as it had danced on the cedar branch. She didn't feel a sudden magical peace. She still felt the sting of the loss. She still felt the ache in her fingers from the broken wood of the loom. But she realized that the ache was not a sign that her life was ruined. It was just an ache. It was a physical sensation. Rising and falling in the rhythm of her own breathing, she looked at the nomad, who was already turning back toward the path. He didn't offer a lecture. He didn't claim to have solved her pain. He just began to walk, his stride steady, his body loose and unburdened by the weight of the patterns he wasn't weaving. Alara followed him. She didn't look back at the broken loom. She walked through the meadow, and as she did, she noticed that the wind was still blowing. The gale hadn't stopped. The mountains hadn't changed, but her relationship to the storm had shifted by a fraction of a degree. She wasn't fighting the gale anymore. She was walking through it, her feet finding the rhythm of the path, her breath settling into the pace of the nomad's stride. That evening, as they reached a small, sheltered cave, Alara did not reach for a loom. She did not reach for thread. She sat by a small fire the nomad had built, and she watched the sparks drift up toward the roof of the cave. She noticed a worry flickering in her mind, a thought about what she would do tomorrow, how she would survive without her patterns, and who she would be if she wasn't the weaver. She saw the thought clearly. She felt the familiar urge to grab it, to weave it into a safety net. But this time she didn't. She took a slow, deep breath, feeling the warmth of the fire on her skin. She let the thought spin, let it turn like a vane in the gale, and then she let it go. She didn't push it. She didn't judge it. She just allowed it to dissipate, like the sparks vanishing into the dark. She felt the tension in her stomach start to uncoil. She felt her shoulders drop. For the first time in years, she wasn't trying to interpret the wind. She was just sitting in the cave, and for now, that was enough. She looked at her hands. They were empty. They weren't weaving. They weren't clinging to bone needles or silk threads. They were just hands, resting on her knees, warm in the firelight. She felt the mountain outside, the vast, impersonal, beautiful reality of the earth. and she realized that she was not separate from it. She didn't need to tie it to her will. She didn't need to predict it to be part of it. She was just another ribbon of silk, dancing in the gale, held by the same wind that moved the clouds and the stars. And in that moment of surrender, the silence of the cave felt not like an emptiness, but like a home. The struggle you feel is not a sign that you are doing something wrong. It is a sign that you are human, caught in the ancient, reflexive habit of trying to build a shelter out of clouds. Think about how much energy you spend every day trying to stabilize the temperature of your own life. When a cold gust of disappointment blows in, you immediately begin to shiver and clench, convinced that if you can just understand why the air turned freezing, you will be able to summon a warmer climate. This is the mechanism of resistance. It is the part of your mind that believes, quite mistakenly, that you are the architect of the weather. You believe that if you can just figure out the sequence of the gusts, if you can just map the terrain of your own past mistakes or predict the trajectory of your future anxieties, you will finally earn the right to be at peace. But peace is not a trophy you win by successfully forecasting the storm. Peace is the mountain that remains after the weather has finished its performance. You have been treating your thoughts as if they are the truth of your existence, rather than seeing them for what they are: brief, transient movements of air. When you replay a mistake from 3 years ago, you are not engaging in wisdom. You are simply trying to rearrange the dust on the temple floor after the wind has already died down. It is an exhausting circular activity, and it creates a density in your heart that makes it harder for the present moment to get through. This density is what we call the second wound. The first wound is the actual event, the heartbreak, the loss, the failure, or the simple, painful recognition of your own limitations. That is a natural part of living. It is the wind striking the mountain. It hurts. It is supposed to hurt. You do not need to numb yourself to that initial sting. But the second wound is the layer of judgment you pour over the top of it. It is the voice that says, "I should have known better," or "This means I am fundamentally broken," or "If I had just been a little more careful, the wind wouldn't have blown this hard." That voice is not the truth. It is the sound of your own resistance trying to turn a natural event into a personal catastrophe. By judging your pain, you turn a passing gust into a permanent winter. You start to identify with the storm, thinking that because you are experiencing chaos, you must be a chaotic person. You begin to weave your identity out of the very things that cause you suffering. You hold on to the worry, the self-criticism, and the frantic need for approval as if they are the only things keeping you anchored. But these are not anchors. They are weights tied to your ankles, making it impossible to drift with the current of your own life. They make you heavy when you were meant to be fluid. They make you rigid when you were meant to be resilient. Consider the way you hold on to your own history. You carry your regrets like a heavy, rusted chain, rattling them every time the wind picks up, thinking that if you just hold on tight enough, you will avoid repeating the past. But the past is already gone. It is a shadow cast on the cliffside. You cannot change the way the light fell, and you cannot alter the direction the wind moved on that day. Trying to fix the past is like trying to reach out and grab the gust that passed your window yesterday. It is impossible. You only end up stretching yourself thin, exhausting your spirit, and missing the breath of air that is touching your skin right now. The fear of uncertainty is another heavy garment you have been wearing. You are terrified of not knowing what tomorrow brings, so you spend your nights rehearsing every possible tragedy, as if preparation were a form of protection. You think that if you stay awake long enough to worry through every scenario, you will somehow disarm the universe. But uncertainty is not the enemy. Uncertainty is the space in which life happens. It is the empty canvas of the coming morning. When you try to fill it with your anxieties, you are not protecting yourself. You are simply poisoning your sleep. You are choosing to live in a future that does not exist, while ignoring the temple you are actually sitting in. Even your need for approval is just another way of trying to control the wind. You want others to tell you that you are doing it right, that your life makes sense, and that you are safe. But the world is not a static place, and people are not reliable maps. They are just other veins in the same storm. If you look to them for stability, you will only find more motion. True stability, the kind that doesn't shudder when the gale hits, comes from your own internal pivot point. It comes from the realization that you do not need the world to validate your existence in order for you to be real. You are real because you are here. You are real because you are breathing. You are real because you have the capacity to notice all of this without needing to fix a single thing. The suffering you experience is not a sign of your inadequacy. It is a sign of your intelligence. It shows that you have the capacity to see the movement of your life and that you want to be okay. The mistake is not the desire for peace. The mistake is the method, the idea that you can force the mind into a state of perfection, that you can prune away every awkward branch of your personality, and that you can somehow become an untouchable monument that no storm can ever reach. But the mountain is beautiful precisely because it gets weathered. The cliff is grand because it has been eroded by 1,000 years of gale. You are not a fragile porcelain doll that must be kept under glass. You are a mountain, and you are being shaped by the very things you are afraid of. When you feel that familiar pull of self-judgment, that urge to tear down your own temple because it is not perfectly silent, try to pause. Don't fight the judgment. Don't tell yourself you shouldn't be judging. Just notice the texture of the thought. Notice how it feels like a sharp, cold wind against your skin. You don't have to apologize to the wind. You don't have to explain why it is blowing. You just have to acknowledge that it is there. And then, with a slow, deliberate movement, return your attention to the feeling of your breath moving through your ribs. You are learning how to be the space that holds the weather, rather than the person who has to manage it. This is a subtle, radical shift. It means that when you feel sad, you don't panic. You say, here is sadness. It means that when you feel anxious, you don't scream at yourself for being afraid. You say, here is anxiety. You treat these emotions like guests in your temple. You offer them a seat. You let them exist for as long as they need to exist. You don't try to kick them out, and you don't ask them to become something else. You just allow them to pass through, knowing that eventually the wind will change and they will depart. This is the end of the war you have been waging against your own heart. For so long you have been trying to make yourself into a finished, static product. Someone who never worries, someone who is always calm, someone who is never bothered by the gale. But that person does not exist. That person is just a map you drew to feel safe. Your true self is the one who is currently feeling tired, currently feeling uncertain, and currently looking for a way to rest. That person is worthy of love. That person is worthy of peace. That person is exactly what the mountain needs. As the night deepens, let go of the idea that you need to be a finished version of yourself. You are in the middle of a process. You are being weathered, you are being shaped, and you are being refined by the reality of your own life. This is not a failure. It is the path. Every time you notice your own resistance, you are waking up. Every time you decide not to add the second wound, you are reclaiming your power. You don't need to be perfect to be at peace. You just need to be present. And that is something you have been doing all along, even when you didn't know it. Feel the space around you now. Notice the quiet of the room. Notice the way the dark is not empty, but full of a gentle, waiting potential. You have spent so much time holding onto the iron compass of your own expectations, hoping it would tell you where the north was. But you don't need the compass. You can find your way by simply following the rhythm of your own heart. When it beats fast, let it beat fast. When it slows down, let it slow down. You are moving in harmony with the mountain. You are finally home. You might wonder how this mountain silence, this image of the unmoving pin and the dancing vein, can possibly survive the noise of your Tuesday afternoon. It is one thing to feel the truth of this in the deep, velvet dark of your bedroom, and quite another to feel it when the screen of your phone lights up with a message you have been dreading. When you see that name, and the familiar, sharp spike of anxiety hits your chest, remember the crane. That spike is the wind. It is an honest, physical reaction to a stimulus. It is not an error. The trouble begins only when you decide that the spike means you are unsafe, or that you must immediately construct a reply that will force the other person to understand your point of view. When you find yourself hovering over the keyboard, retyping the same sentence for the third time, feeling that desperate need to be perfectly understood, pause. Feel your thumb against the screen. Notice the pressure you are applying. That is the feeling of gripping the iron compass. You are trying to use words to pin down the future, to dictate how the other person will perceive you, and to ensure that you are not rejected. Just take a breath. Let your thumb lift away from the glass. You do not need to solve the relationship in this one instant. You do not need to weave a perfect ribbon of text to protect your heart. You can set the device down for 5 minutes, or 10, or an hour. The wind will keep blowing, but you do not have to be the one who redirects it. This practice is just as vital when you lie awake at night, feeling the heavy, cold weight of a mistake you made months ago. Your mind is a persistent, well-meaning servant that believes it can fix the past if it just reviews the footage one more time. It wants to show you the moment you tripped, the word you should have chosen, the reaction you should have hidden. It thinks it is helping you. It thinks that by obsessing, it is preventing the future from being just as painful. But you know now that the vein does not gain wisdom by spinning backward. You can acknowledge the memory without serving it. When the replay begins, simply name it. Say to yourself, quietly, here is the habit of the mapmaker, looking for a path that no longer exists. Then, turn your attention to the feeling of your heavy legs against the sheets. Feel the weight of your own body, the reality of the present moment, and let the ghost of that old conversation drift away into the shadows of the room. We all carry that quiet, gnawing sense of being behind, of watching others move with ease while we feel like we are constantly trying to catch our breath. It is easy to look at the lives of others and imagine they have found the secret map, the one that keeps the storm at bay. But everyone you know is a mountain in a gale. Everyone is juggling the same fundamental uncertainty, the same flickering thoughts, and the same quiet urge to be known. When the comparison begins to itch, when you feel the shame of not being as composed as you think you should be, remind yourself that you are not supposed to be a monument of stone. You are a living, breathing, weathering landscape. You are doing the work of being human, and that is a task that never ends. Think of those times when you are forced to smile, to perform, to be the person who holds it all together. Even when your inner world feels fractured and tired, you might feel a sting of guilt, as if you are being dishonest, as if you are failing the practice because you cannot be serene while you are burning inside. But there is a deep, compassionate integrity in simply acknowledging that you are tired. You do not have to announce it to the world. You do not have to stop the show. You can just be the person who is playing their part, while internally, you remain the mountain. You can feel the heavy pressure of expectation on the outside, and simultaneously rest in the quiet, empty cave of your own awareness on the inside. You are large enough to hold both the performance and the truth. Perhaps the most difficult test is the guilt of resting itself. You have been conditioned to believe that you are only valuable when you are moving, when you are solving, when you are productive. So, when you try to sit still, or when you finally lay your head down to sleep, the mind starts to list all the things you haven't finished, all the ways you are failing to keep up. It is the fear of being vulnerable, the fear that if you stop running, you will finally have to face the truth of your own humanity. But rest is not a luxury. It is not something you earn only after the map is perfectly drawn. Rest is your natural state. It is the silence that allows the wind to be just wind. Giving yourself permission to stop, to lay down the needle and the thread, to cease the search for a perfect, safe interpretation of your life. This is the most courageous thing you can do. You do not have to earn the right to exist without conflict. You do not have to achieve a state of perfect detachment before you are worthy of peace. Start with the small, microscopic shifts. The next time you feel the urge to lash out in frustration, wait for a single, full cycle of breath before you speak. The next time you feel the panic of a future worry, place your hand on your heart and feel the steady, rhythmic drum that has been beating since before you were born. The next time you realize you are judging yourself for being anxious, stop and whisper to your own heart, here is the mountain, feeling the weather. You are refining your relationship with your own existence. You are learning that the weather is not the truth. The weather is just a temporary, fleeting expression of a world that is always in motion. You are the space that holds it. And as you walk through your days, as you go to work, as you talk to your friends, as you navigate the inevitable surprises and disappointments, You can carry this mountain stillness with you. You don't have to announce it. You don't have to teach it. You just have to live from that center. You just have to remember, when the wind picks up, that you are not the one who needs to hold the gale in place. You are the one who is finally truly learning how to be the mountain. Notice how the tension you brought into this hour has begun to shift. You aren't forcing it away. You aren't demanding that it vanish. It is simply becoming less significant, less heavy, and less urgent. That is the natural result of letting go. When you stop fighting the gale still blows, but it no longer defines your identity. You are becoming someone who can navigate the complexities of life without losing their fundamental connection to the quiet. You are becoming someone who knows that when the iron compass is left on the shelf, the path actually opens up clear and wide beneath your own feet. If you still feel the echoes of the day, if the mind is still attempting to tidy up the edges of your life, let it. Let the mind do its housekeeping. Just don't participate in the cleaning. Don't pick up the broom yourself. Sit back in the chair of your awareness and watch the mind tidy the room. Watch it move the furniture of your memories and arrange the patterns of your worries. It is harmless work, as long as you do not think that the room belongs to you, and as long as you do not think that the furniture defines your reality. You are the house. You are the space. You are the silence that allows the mind to be active and the heart to be still. And in this moment, nothing else is required. You are not missing a single thing. You have not forgotten an essential detail. The world is spinning, the wind is moving, and you are here, exactly where you are meant to be, at the heart of your own quiet, steady mountain. The mountain has grown quiet now, and the wind has faded to a mere whisper against the stone. You can feel the change in the air of your own room. The heavy iron compass of your expectations has been left behind on the threshold of your awareness. There is no need to pick it up again tonight. There is no need to map the terrain of your own dreams or to ensure that your thoughts are following the proper path. The vein of your mind is no longer fighting the gale. It is simply resting, held by the unmoving pin of your own presence, waiting for nothing, wanting nothing, and existing only as the space that allows the night to unfold. Feel the way your body has responded to this shift. Your shoulders are sinking into the mattress, no longer tasked with the heavy work of holding up the world. Your hands are quiet, the fingers soft and uncurled, as if they have finally let go of the needle, the thread, and the loom. You have moved through the day with such a heavy load of trying, but here, in the deepening dark, that load has simply fallen away. You are not losing anything by letting go. You are only shedding the things that were never yours to carry. The wind that once felt like a threat is now just the gentle movement of the night. It flows through the room, brushing against your skin, and you do not need to identify it. You do not need to label it as a breeze or a storm. You are the mountain, and you are far too vast to be shaken by a shift in the air. Let your breath become shallow, a soft, slow rhythm that matches the stillness of the mountain at midnight. There is no destination you need to reach in your sleep. There is no wisdom you need to manufacture while your eyes are closed. You are already in the temple, and the doors are locked against the noise of the world. If a stray thought wanders by like a cloud crossing the face of the moon, let it pass. Do not chase it. Do not attempt to catch it or turn it into a map. Just watch it drift, a thin silver streak against the dark, until it fades into the distance of your own mind. It has no power here. It is just another movement, another flicker, another piece of the weather that the mountain observes with complete, compassionate indifference. You are the space that holds the cloud, and you are the space that remains when the cloud is gone. The room is dark, the house is still, and your heart is beating with the ancient steady rhythm of the earth itself. Every time you exhale, feel yourself sinking deeper into the quiet. Imagine the mountain air, cool and clear, filling your lungs and clearing the dust of the day from your spirit. There is no shame in being tired. There is no failure in needing to close your eyes. You have been a weaver, a map maker, and a keeper of veins for long enough. Tonight, you are only a witness. Tonight, you are only the breath. Everything you have done today, every effort to stay kind, and every moment of forgetting, is part of the unfolding story. It does not need to be sorted. It does not need to be analyzed by the light of the morning. Let the events of the day dissolve into the dark like a ribbon released into a deep, silent valley. They are gone. They are no longer your work. The only work left is to let go of the idea that you must be anyone other than who you are in this breath. You are held. You are grounded. The foundation of your own being is as firm as the granite of the peaks. You have nothing left to prove to the gale. You have nothing left to explain to the clouds. The silence is your sanctuary and the stillness is your strength. Let your eyes remain closed and feel the weight of your eyelids, the peaceful heaviness of a mapmaker who has finally set down their quill. There is no tomorrow you must build tonight. There is only the dark, the space, and the mountain that never needs to move to be home. Your body is sinking, becoming one with the quiet, becoming one with the night. The need for answers is gone. The pressure to understand is gone. There is only the soft, rhythmic pulsing of your own existence, a light glowing deep within the center of the mountain, unwavering and serene. You are the stillness that the wind finally learns to trust. You are the calm that settles over the cliffs when the stars begin their watch. Rest, then, in the certainty that you have returned to the center of your own life. Everything that was asked of you today has been given. Everything that was felt has been seen. And now there is only the vast open space of the night, where you can finally be what you have been all along. You are not the vein that turns, and you are not the compass that points. You are the mountain that holds it all. If you were to let go of every story you tell about who you are, what is the quiet, steady presence that remains here in the dark?